All right, you mugs, can you hear me? I don't know if you can hear me or not, but.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, hi.
I can hear you.
All right, good, that works. All right, guys, we'll get going. Thank you guys for logging on for our first Zoom virtual training for fire CEs. This will also be recording, so if you need to run off somewhere, in theory, it'll be up on our YouTube site, and
Hi guys.
you can watch it and take a little quiz.
Yeah, she said she has 20.
She has 8 cups?
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna get going. This is winter fire emergencies. Excuse me. Little revamp from the last time we did this one a couple years ago. I know it's one of Alex's favorites, so we'll get going. Hopefully the technology is gonna work. We'll see. If you have questions, either unmute yourself and just ask. We don't, unfortunately, we couldn't afford the version that allows us to do webinars where you can type questions in and all that kind of stuff. And make sure I know who you are so that you can get your certificates. So if your name's not on the screen, just send me a little note in chat who you are so I can make sure you get your certificate, because you want your CEs. That's why you're here, right? So here we go. All right, you guys all seeing that?
Yeah, I see it.
Yay, all right, good. Woo,
Yep.
that works. Technology. All right, here we go. So winter fire emergencies. Why winter fire emergencies? Because it is, in fact, the winter. And according to the Weather Service and a few other people, it's going to get really cold in the next couple of weeks. And we also finally have the potential for some snow. I just read an interesting factoid the other day that here in Southwest Ohio, we've gone almost 800 days without a winter storm warning. So maybe we'll break that because I'm a big fan of the snow and stuff. So we'll see. So that's what we're talking about here when it's really cold and scary. I've had a lot of years doing this and had the opportunity to get frozen to the ground by a pump panel. And have that excitement. So we want to avoid that. So we're going to talk about different things we can do. So first off, some common incident types. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of crisis here. Technology, there we go. Okay, common incident types that we see in the winter. Chimney fires or chimbley fires if you're a good old Ohio boy or girl. Furnace incidents, gas leaks, CO incidents, motor vehicle crashes, and utility line incidents. And notice I don't say utility line emergencies because they are not emergencies typically. So we'll start with some chimney fires. I assume most of you, well, maybe some of you have been on a chimney fire in the past. They can be a lot of work and turn into something pretty heavy. So what we got there is a photo of a chimney fire. Fire normally should not be coming out of the chimney. That's where smoke is supposed to come out of. So if we remember correctly, if we were back to fire class, what is it that's burning in the chimney? It's creosote. Creosote, the buildup from incomplete combustion. And schmutz is a technical term for that. So chimney fires burn explosively. If you've ever been on one where it's actually burning, it's almost like a roar that you can hear in their low rumble sound. And it actually makes a lot of noise. That's sometimes how people know that they've got a problem because they have this weird noise coming out of their chimney. They burn very hot indeed, including pyrolysis. It's been a long time since I said that word. Remember back to fire class for that one. One of the big problems with a chimney fire, people a lot of times, especially newer firefighters, will say, what's the problem with a chimney fire? It's in the chimney, who cares? Is that it's hot enough that it can crack your flue pipe and then spread the fire into the house, which is what we definitely want to avoid. It also causes a lot of property damage, smoke damage to the home. We can cause some roof damage, or the fire can, and then damage to the chimney. So remember that one of our tactical priorities as firefighters is to conserve property. So we don't want to do or have more damage caused than need be. Here we have the anatomy of a chimney, different parts of the chimney. And those of you who've been around this fire department for a while realize, or probably know at this point, that if you live in Yellow Springs or Miami Township, apparently it is your God-given right to have a fire in your fireplace or Coleman stove anytime between the end of August and mid-April. I don't know if that's like some kind of weird liberal thing, but people like that. So here are different parts of the chimney, starting down here with your firebox assembly. Excuse me, where this is where the fire is lit. So this is typically going to be wood. Hopefully people are burning the right kind of wood and not treated lumber. People do that because they're nuts. So you got the firebox with fire brick that's lining the rear. If it's an old chimney and the fire brick hasn't been retucked and pointed over the years, fire can actually go through the masonry, openings in the masonry, and start the fire back here. Then you've got the damper, which controls the smoke. We've been on many incidents where someone lights a fire and they forgot to open their damper or didn't even know they had one. So instead of the smoke then going up here, it's now rolling out and filling their house with smoke, and they freak out. Smoke goes up, and then you've got the flue and the flue lining. Flue lining can be masonry, it can be ceramic, or it can be metal. Sometimes it's just brick, depending on who built the thing and how old the chimney is. And it pierces the wall, and then also goes alongside the roof through the attic and that type of stuff. And then at the top, there's a chimney cap, and if you're out west, and some places here, you'll have a spark arrestor on the top to keep sparks from going and starting Montana on fire. Sorry. This is just going over where the creosote, or how the creosote forms. Again, this is incomplete combustion, our biggest enemy in the fire service. So it's just forming on the, I don't know why I'm pointing because you guys can't see me, but it's forming on the inside of the chimney flue and in the piping here. And then it gets hot and it can burn and cause fires. Creosote is also used, you know, if you're like, well, that sounds familiar. That's the stuff that they treat railroad ties with. And if you come from my neck of the woods on the East Coast, the underside of a pier or a boardwalk is treated in that. So that's a very distinct smell. It's great for waterproofing, but it's also good for catching on fire with enough heat. So there you go, the anatomy of a chimney. So some chimney damage at top here. At 2,000 degrees, it can melt the masonry. Fires will get that hot in a chimney, 2,000 degrees. That's very hot. Keep that in mind, very hot. Most structure fires, you know, if we're in the burn room and we get to about 1,500 degrees, that's super hot. 2,000 is going to be very, very hot and melt the masonry, which will cause problems. Crack the tile, which allows heat and fire to get through. Excuse me. And then can also crack the tubing in a metal chimney. And that, again, is where we allow the fire to get through and cause the house to catch on fire. So for the chimney fire response, this is actually not one of ours, but this is a photo of a chimney fire that went awry. So the most important thing is don't be complacent. When you go to a chimney fire, it is a structure fire. By its very nature, it is a fire within a structure. So it's going to get the full, or at least it should, get the full alarm assignment. Currently, that's 4 engines, the rescue, a chief, and 2 medics. You'll get the 4 engines. No one knows about what else we'll get. And then we add 4 tankers in if it's out in the country, in the unhydrated areas. My experience here has been that the vast majority of our chimney fires are here in town. I don't really, probably because there's more houses here. But when you get there, be ready to fight your fire. That means you're coming off just like you would for a structure fire. At least you better be coming off that way. So your gear is on, your pack is on your back, you are ready to go. The company officer, if you're the first arriving officer, you are checking that house. You're doing a really good size up, and you are making sure everything that needs to be done. What kind of tactical priorities? Do we have a fire? Do you need to get a ladder up right away? Do you need to go inside and start checking for extension? Consider also, maybe we need a ladder truck. That'll make our life a little easier to get up to the roof. However, keep in mind that ladder trucks take a lot of space. They need to be directly in front of the structure. So if you pulled up and put the engine there, and then Hammond pulls a rescue in right behind you, we've now blocked the access for a ladder truck. So things to think about as you're going to the scene. The other thing to think about is a ladder truck is pretty useless at most homes in Yellow Springs due to the setbacks as well as the number of trees that are in the front yard. So think about it. You may not necessarily want it right away or at all. So some basic equipment you're going to need for these include salvage covers, or as our dear departed Australian friend Bob would say, a tarpaulin. And this is where we want the real good salvage covers, the ones that are canvas or that rubberized stuff. We're going to need a shovel. You want the 1 3/4 hand line with a chimney nozzle on it. The ticks are the greatest thing since sliced bread for this kind of incident. So you can check all the exposures and everything and make sure it's good. Remember, when you look at a wall where the chimney is going through or right behind, if the chimney is on fire, that wall is going to have some heat. So you really need to figure out how much heat there is. If it's 100 degrees, whoopee. If it's the wall is showing at 1800 degrees, it's probably going to burst into flames soon. A mirror. Mirrors are used at the top of the chimney to look down the chimney so you don't put your face over a burning chimney. I definitely recommend against that. Metal bucket, which I think we have on, well, the engine, and I think the rescue has one, to carry the debris out. Not PricewaterhouseCoopers, a pressurized water extinguisher, a can, or a dry chem extinguisher. Try and steer clear of the CO2 extinguishers. They're not very good at this kind of fire, and they're very expensive when we have to recharge them. And then PPE is appropriate. Again, this is going to be your turnout gear and your SCBA on your back, ready to go. So interior. Chimney fires are, as I said, a structure fire, but they're also one where we move the property conservation priority up. So we want to make sure everyone's out of the house like we would at a structure fire. Sometimes the people don't exactly understand that. If it's cold out, we need to give them a place to go. So if the medic's there, maybe put them in the back of the medic while we figure things out. So get some salvage covers in place. The rule of thumb is this house with a burning chimney and the fireplace is going to have a white carpet for some strange reason. That's just how it works. So if you can get floor runners down or just salvage covers or even just tarps down to protect their property from us, that's a good thing. It's an interesting choice of words. Open the damper on the chimney to try and get everything going up the chimney and allow you to subdue the fire with the extinguisher. This is basically the equivalent of what we do with slicers. You want to knock that fire down on the inside using the extinguisher. So shoot the PW can up the inside or the dry cam. Careful with the dry cam because it will make a mess all over the place. Get combustibles out, remove the vent pipe if needed up on the top. And then if there's a crew up on the roof when you use the can or the dry cam, make sure they know it because all that stuff's going to go up the chimney right in their face. If you're up top, remove the chimney cap as needed. So typically it's going to have to come off. There are many homes where the chimney cap either was never installed. There might be a bird's nest sitting up there. Or it's already, we've probably been there before and it's partially off. Use the mirror to visualize the fire. And then using the chimney nozzle, or any nozzle you can use, the chimney nozzle specifically designed for this, use it to extinguish the fire. So you're going to lower the charge line down the chimney, down the flue pipe. And that thing is heavy enough to knock the schmutz and the burning creosote off the inside down into the firebox, where then we can collect it, put it out with a PW can, collect it, and put it in the metal bucket and take it outside. The I lost my train of thought. Chimney snuffer works by misting water. So it's not a sudden influx of cold water on this burning material, because while that'll put it out, it will also crack the chimney pipe. So we want to try and keep that down so we don't crack that pipe and cause more problems than we need. So additionally, we want to check for extension of the structure. This picture is a good one. This is a telltale sign. If you got fire or a lot of sparks coming out, it's a good sign you've got a fire going in that chimney. Remove debris from the chimney cleanout if it has one. Ventilate the house as needed. Obviously, we want to give it back to them in as good a condition as we can. And this one should go without saying, but make sure the homeowner or the renter or whoever it is knows don't use your fireplace until it's inspected. They need to get a chimney sweep in there. They still exist. Get a chimney sweep in there to inspect and clean out that chimney. So some safety considerations. What you're seeing on this picture is real. This wasn't one of our people. It's not even in our area. This is Pennsylvania. They were fighting the fire. There's a whole video that goes with this, and everyone has SCBA but no gear on. So PPE for all. So get your SCBA, get your turnout gear on. Make sure you're ready. Have your SCBA on, particularly if you're up on the roof, because there's gonna be a lot of smoke up there. Get a tech channel assigned. They do that automatically in theory. Keep in mind the roof might be slippery. You could have a crazy slope on this roof as well. So this is where roof ladders could be very helpful. And check the roof integrity. Hopefully you all remember how to do that. You know, tap, tap, tap before you get off on the roof with your ladder. So we avoid that with your tool, sorry. So we avoid this. You don't want to fall through. This is a guy, I think, from Baltimore County fire. So we don't want to go through the roof, because that is not a good thing. I have never gone through a roof, but I've had a roof come down on me, and that wasn't fun either. So sorry about that. So safety considerations there. Any questions on chimney fires before we move on? All right, fantastic. I'm trying to figure something out here. Oh, I'll figure it out. All right, furnace incidents, very common as well. So as we talk about furnaces, there are 4 primary types of furnaces. I guess there's 5 if we include wood-burning stoves that are common, and recently actually started a fire that A-Shift had. So natural gas is the most common furnace type in the US, and it's probably the most common in our area as well. Oil-burning furnaces, less common in this part of the country. They're very common where I came from, the Northeast. But there are still a lot of oil-burning furnaces out in our neck of the woods, primarily out in the township area. You'll find them. Typically, you'll see kind of a weird oval-shaped tank on the side of the house, and that's an oil tank. They used to bury them. That's not really kosher anymore. Electric furnaces, typically don't have a whole lot of issues with these, other than maybe a short circuit. And then propane, which is very common out in the township area. And then we also have boilers. There was an HVAC contractor, plumber guy who lived in town. He passed away recently. And he was a huge proponent of home boilers. So there are houses throughout Yellow Springs and the township that have a small boiler in them, where the water is heated up, causes steam, and the steam heats, and they've got radiators throughout their house. Boilers are also very common in commercial occupancies, particularly up on campus. There's boilers, I think, pretty much in every building. They're all natural gas boilers. So just something to keep in mind. Boilers tend not to have a whole lot of problems. So that's a good thing. So typically, there's a furnace incident. Usually the homeowner, the occupant, whoever, they're smelling a burning or an oily odor that they smell. If you can think about like the times where you fired up your furnace for the first time of the year and there is dust on the burner in the furnace, that doesn't really catch on fire, but it starts to heat and smoke, and it makes kind of a burning smell, and that's what these people are smelling. So you're gonna use your tick, check around the furnace or wherever they think they're smelling burning to check for that. Check the furnace filters. Typically, furnace incidents are less about the furnace and more about the ancillary parts. So filters can get completely clogged and someone will be like, well, I haven't changed that filter in 40 years. And that could be causing part of the problem. You could also have vent pipes that are blocked. There could be a bird's nest in the vent pipe. So it's important, especially if this is a gas, natural gas or propane, or an oil furnace, any kind of hydrocarbon, to also check the house for carbon monoxide while you're doing this. Check the pilot light. It's the little light that burns the bottom of every gas appliance. It may be out and allowing gas to escape. Maybe also be why the furnace isn't working. Remember, they do smell when they're first used. This could be a fire, so you're full PPE, SCBA ready to go just in case. And then beware of the white ghost. No, I did it. The white ghost is a Scooby-Doo character, but is also a real fire thing that you encounter with oil burning furnaces. What happens in an oil burning furnace is the furnace takes the oil, which is typically fuel oil, which is like a heavy diesel, basically, and it atomizes it so that ignites. What'll happen is it stops igniting and it just keeps atomizing, and it's a white, almost like a white, oily mist in throughout the house or typically the basement. The problem with that is that atomized fuel oil is extremely flammable. So combustible, I guess is a better term. So we need to be really careful. If you go in and you're like covered in this oil, get out. Don't even key up your radio in there. It's that potentially explosive. About 15 years ago, there were 3 guys killed in Connecticut when they hit their push to talk on a radio inside one of these situations and the entire house exploded. So luckily we don't have a whole lot of these oil furnaces anymore, but they're still out there. So again, you go in the basement where the furnace is, you may hear a clicking sound as this thing is atomizing but not igniting. And you get this real just oily feeling, you taste it, get out, and we'll go from there. Questions on furnace incidents? Cool, that's easy. All right, gas leaks. Everyone's favorite, the gas leak. So they're common in colder months, but they're also common throughout the year here. Gas lines do leak. We just had a whole bunch of new gas lines put into the village at Yellow Springs, so that should hopefully help cut down this to a degree, but we'll see. Pilot lights are a common cause of residential gas leaks where people smell gas because their pilot is out. It may also be from the furnace. It could be from the water heater. It could be from a stove. But that gas is just then flowing into the house. You may have gas leaks because someone left a burner on and it's no longer hasn't ignited and it's just filling the house with gas. So be very careful with these because it's easy to say, oh, it's another freaking gas leak. But remember that gas does like to explode, so we need to be really careful. Our 2 primary gases, well, the primary gases are propane and natural gas. We're going to talk about those in the next slide. The effects of complacency can be catastrophic. There are hundreds of firefighters who've been injured or lost their lives over the years on gas incidents where they totally thought, well, this is nothing, smells and bells, that kind of thing. And then something happens and the gas ignites and the guys are injured or killed. So be serious about it and follow what our SOP says so that you avoid this. That is a gas leak that ignited. So we don't want that. That's a hell of a fireball and you probably won't survive being in there. Sorry. So natural gas versus propane, what's the big difference? There's a whole bunch of info on that slide. The important thing is the second one down in both columns. Natural gas, excuse me, is low density, so it is lighter than air, whereas propane is heavier than air. So what does that mean? It means that natural gas is going to be easier for us to disperse by opening windows and that type of stuff because it's going to want to rise and go out of the structure. propane is going to hang out in the lowest areas that it can find. So it may pool up in the basement, which is a problem. We had an incident 10, 12 years ago out on Houston Road in a relatively new home that was constructed, a nice big house. We had a propane furnace and it wasn't working. And the homeowner went down into the basement to figure what was going out. And he went out through the outside dormer entrance. So he goes down and he smells gas and he can hear this clicking as it's putting the gas out, but nothing is igniting. So he does what he always does, and he goes to flip the light switch on. Light switch, the entire basement's filled with propane, just enough that he flips the light switch, it causes a spark, wow, causes a spark like it normally would, and it explodes. The homeowner is then blown 30 feet out of the house, and the roof of the house in the explosion lifts up and comes back down at a slight angle to where it had been. So there was a lot of bizarre damage and fire in the house. Part of the ceiling collapsed on top of Ted, but obviously it didn't beat him because he's still with us today, thank goodness. The homeowner had significant burns to his face and trunk. So this stuff is dangerous, and we just need to be careful and respect it. So apparatus issues. The alarm assignment for inside or outdoor is a single engine. If it's indoor, you want to respond lights and sirens because this is a dangerous situation. Outdoor, typically it's less likely to explode because it's out in the air, it's going to dissipate, people are just smelling something. You may want, if you get dispatched for an outdoor one where they say that a gas line was struck by a contractor, you probably want to get there quickly because you may have a tremendous amount of gas leaking that we're going to need to jump into action and start evacuating homes and that type of stuff. Whenever possible, respond from upwind if you can. If you know which direction the wind is coming from, it'll keep you safe. Whatever you do, do not, if it's a house or a commercial structure, do not stage directly in line with the structure. Don't park right out front like we normally would. Why? If a house explodes, it explodes out the sides. So the front, the sides, the back, they'll all blow out. The safest place for you to stage is kind of in line with the corner of the house. That's the safest place. So pull past a little bit. Make sure you're at that corner and not directly in front. And then don't use the hydrant. If there's one directly in front of the structure that's involved, don't plan on using that hydrant. This comes out of an incident that happened in Rochester, New York about 20 years ago. Where guys pulled up, they staged right in front, they hooked that hydrant, the house exploded, there was a crazy guy in there who detonated his house, killed 2 firefighters, but then the hydrant was completely covered in debris and they weren't able to utilize it. So plan on using a different hydrant as well, if there's one directly in front of the house, which rarely happens. But. So for indoor world, get everyone out. If we don't want to take a chance, get them out of there. Send 2 crew members. This is from the old days when we had a lot more people. If you've got more than 2 people or more than 3 or 4 on that engine, keep some of the crew outside so that they can swing into action in case something bad happens. One of the things I was taught early in my career as a pump operator, you pull up on scene, some of your crew goes in, you get your pump going like you normally would, and then turn your deck gun towards the structure that's involved. God forbid if it explodes.
I'm having trouble hearing you.
Shut up, Siri. God forbid if it explodes, you can start at least getting some water on it right away. Excuse me. Once you're there and you know that there's an actual gas leak, contact the gas supplier. Some people really get into the thing about we're dispatched for a gas leak. Central, go ahead and call Vectron right away. Wait till you get there and know that it's actually a gas leak and not something else that may be causing that smell. Attempt to locate and shut off the source. So it could be a stove, a furnace, whatever. If you can't find a source or if it's too dangerous, try and shut it off at the meter. Hopefully you all remember from your fire class the process of shutting off a meter. It is not always as easy as we taught you in fire class, because if that meter has not been serviced or shut off in eons, it's going to be tough to do that. So just keep that in mind. Also, just FYI, some of these older ones, you may actually need to use a wrench versus a hydrant wrench, like a real wrench. Some of these new hydrant wrenches are made of pyrolite, and that stuff will snap. It'll snap right off if you're trying to turn the meter, and the meter is really sticky. So monitor the atmosphere. We have a gas meter for that, and ventilate is needed. Don't put the electric fan inside a house that's filled with gas. That spark can ignite it. So ventilate from the outside. If it's an outdoor gas leak, get in the area, dismount, and investigate on foot. Try not to stage in the middle of where the gas odor is. It is easier typically to investigate on foot than sitting in the cab of the engine with your head hanging out the side. Shut down traffic. We don't want ignition sources. This is what the cops are good for. Sorry, Dave. Shut down traffic and try and keep everyone out while we figure out what's going on. If we suspect a propane leak, check low-lying areas. It's going to pool there. Make sure, so culverts and that kind of stuff. Make sure that it's not down there. If, again, a significant odor or leak is found, contact the gas supplier. Who is our gas supplier for this area? I hope we all know. Vectren. But if it's propane, Vectren is not the propane supplier. Vectren only does natural gas. So if you're out in the township and they've got a big propane tank and there's some leak, you need to call that vendor. And there are multiple different vendors. So find out who it is. They should have their name or information on the tank. And then evacuate the area outdoors as necessary. It's been a few years since Todd Van Lane, local contractor, has struck a gas line. Usually it's his annual thing. Gas lines operate under a lot of pressure, so if it's a big line, you might see dirt and sand blowing up in the air from the pressure of the gas. So we need to get people out of their homes in the immediate area, especially if we get at least a 10% on the LEL, which will do what? Yes, very good. It will activate the LEL alarm. All right, questions on the gas leaks? What the hell happened there? Okay, carbon monoxide, CO. Remember, carbon monoxide is CO. It is not CO2. CO2 is carbon dioxide. Di for two. They are completely different. They will both kill you, but carbon monoxide incidents are more common. So, CO incident. Uh-oh. What the heck? Ah, there we go. Wait, nope. Okay, CO incidents. So typically dispatch is gonna send an engine and a medic if an illness is reported, which means they're gonna send an engine and medic all the time. So listen to what the dispatcher says, look in active 911 for the notes and see if people are reporting illness. Then we really need to get a medic going, either ours or someone else's. You must wear your PPE and you want your SCBA on your back, ready to go. It is a rare occurrence that we go and there is a significant carbon monoxide incident going on. But they do happen. We had one years and years ago. It was a morning from hell. The radio system was down. I had to call people on the phone to respond. When we finally arrived at these people's house about 28 minutes after the incident, here we are thinking, oh, it's just going to be a typical bad battery in a CO detector. They actually had 400 parts per million of CO in the house. Everyone had headaches. The husband was almost unresponsive. We actually had to give oxygen to the dog. So you can encounter real incidents as well with these. So have your SCBA ready to go. Check the area with a gas meter. If carbon monoxide is greater than 10 parts per million, evacuate the area. Now you're probably thinking, if I walk down the street in Manhattan in New York City, the background CO is far greater than 10 parts per million. You are correct. But we got to go with national standards and get them out just to be on the safe side. Try to locate the source and shut it down if it's possible. Ventilate as necessary, and obviously treat your patients as necessary. They're the important people. So, what are our sources? Here we go. Common sources. These are all fuel burning sources. Electric appliances do not put out carbon monoxide. Do not embarrass yourself by saying something like that on the radio, because we'll all laugh at you. So common sources include the furnace, water heater, a dryer, again if it's a gas dryer, barbecues, especially if someone uses their barbecue in their garage, stoves, the car. Someone left their car running in the garage. People do that to warm it up in the morning, or in a carport, not realizing that that carport is attached to the house and that carbon monoxide is being sucked in. A fuel-fired fireplace. Fuel-fired fireplace. Blocked vents on a chimney are very common. And then a portable fuel-fired generator. It's been very common in this neck of the woods, particularly since all over the country. After 9/11, home generator sales skyrocketed. And then in our area, after Hurricane Ike came through in like 2008, 2009 or something like that, again, they skyrocketed. So people have generators installed, but they also get the portable ones, and they'll run them in the house, that kind of stuff. You may also have people who are total imbeciles and will run an unvented kerosene heater, for instance, like a salamander, construction site salamander in their home. Aside from the fact they may blow the house up, they're also filling it with carbon monoxide too. So these are your common sources. Just more, remember again, it's from incomplete combustion. They've got to be these things. So natural gas, propane, oil, wood burning, coal, those things are going to do it. Power tools, think about that. I've been on incidents where their house has carbon monoxide in it. It's because, Jim Bob was running his chainsaw in the house. He does his chainsaw servicing in the dining room, and thought it was a good idea to run that chainsaw for a while, and now grandma's dead. So, check all those things, shut them down, go from there. The most common CO incident we have, though, is the faulty alarm. So check the house with the detector. If there's no CO found, it's more than likely a bad detector. I always like to advise them to contact, if we think it's their furnace, contact their furnace company just to have it checked. You should have all those things checked on an annual basis, your furnace and your water heater, those kind of stuff. So hopefully they will. Carbon monoxide questions? Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? Cool. All right. Motor vehicle crashes. Now, we have these throughout the year. I know you're probably thinking, well, Chief, we always have them. But they take on a special thing in the winter. So, biggest one, it's the winter, and therefore it's cold. So, we're freezing, but think of the patients. These are people who are like trapped in their car, and we're in turnout gear, which at least does provide some protection, but they may not have much on at all. So think about that. Think about if we are doing trauma care while they're trapped, and we're cutting off items of clothing. You may not want to do that out when it's 22 below zero, which you get in the medic. That's why trauma care is something that we adjust, and it's not a rote, always the same thing, no matter what some people will tell you. It's going to be slick and slippery on the scene. As our dear departed former safety officer, Jack Leibold, would tell you, it'll be slicker and snot, which is pretty slick. We have had incidents where it was nothing but ice. I can remember going to an incident, mutual aid to Houston, for a crash where they requested our engine and medic, and I went as well. It was on 72, State Route 72 north of Clifton. There's a place where there's a place where 72 kind of goes down a hill, and there's a the crash was the bottom of the hill. So our engine came over the hill. Houston had called and said, we're just over this hill, be real careful. So the engine came over at about 10 miles per hour, and the road was nothing but ice, and began to slide down the hill towards the crash site. And listening to the description from Houston's incident commander was absolutely terrifying. Thank God we had a very, very, very good motor pump operator that night, and he was able to actually get the truck moving to a different direction, and then bring it to a stop safely. The medic didn't come down the hill initially. People were sliding, cars were sliding. Unfortunately, ODOT was not available because their trucks were all up on the interstate. So eventually, the ambulances couldn't even transport. It was that slick that they had no traction on the road. So eventually, we were to get the Miami Township Road Department to come, and the road guy at that time, John Finn, actually had to turn his truck around and back down the hill so the salt spreader was putting it out, so he was driving on the salt. It was a crazy scene. We were on scene for about 3.5 hours. Also keep in mind, if we're going to do extrication, which is not a very common thing for us, but if we're going to do that with the tools are going to be significantly slower because the hydraulic fluid gets chilled and the tools don't run as well. Motor vehicle crash alarm assignments, the same for, excuse me, same in the winter as it is in the every other time. So it's an engine, me, and 2 medics plus the rescue if it's dispatched with entrapment, because we want to get two sets of jaws going. The days of us getting all this stuff just ourselves are probably pretty slim, but who knows? It could change. So it might be filled with mutual aid if you're the officer in charge. Think about that. Listen to what the dispatch tells you and go from there. It's really weird. Okay, so years ago we put a memo out about this. We put it into the SOPs, and I did it. I was the driver of this. That the engine should, whenever possible, always go first to a crash in case there are fire hazards present. That was done back in the days when we had a lot more people showing up for calls. So at this point, especially if you're a small crew, there are certain days we just have 2 people. Listen to what the dispatch says and take the appropriate apparatus out first. It may be the medic. 9 times out of 10, the medic is what you need on the scene. So if they're not reporting entrapment or fire hazards, and it's a small crew, take the ambulance. If they say there's smoke, there's fire, there are people trapped, obviously the engine goes, and then get mutual aid for whatever else you need. A size up is absolutely essential. Everyone else coming needs to know what you see when you get there. So heavy damage, moderate damage, minor damage. I think Nate did a drill a couple years back on kind of assessing the different damage when you pull up. So maybe we can pull that out again sometime so you say the right thing. Control the scene. Shut down traffic when you feel it's necessary, at least in the lane you're operating on. We want to protect our guys and our patients. There used to be all this scuttlebutt where the cops didn't want traffic shut down. More often than not, they're happy to have traffic shut down, especially the troopers. It makes their life a lot easier and safer. Make sure you get your vests on. People do not pay attention. As you all know, you've all been on that call where people are yahoos. So make sure that you are wearing your traffic vests and are careful. If you're on the engine or the medic, be careful getting off the truck. Watch where traffic is. Get off on the correct side. This means you cannot be freaking out. You need to stay calm and make good choices. If we've got both the engine and medic there, remember the role of the companies. This used to be a problem when we had a lieutenant here who relatively always fractured the English language. He would be on the engine, and then he'd swing into paramedic mode. If you're the engine crew, your primary job is engine stuff. Once engine stuff is done, transition over to help the medic unit. So let the medic do the medic stuff, let the engine do the engine stuff until it's time for us all to play together. If there's an extrication that has to go on, we need to establish a 50-foot exclusion zone around the car or truck or whatever it may be, so that people who are not protected don't wander in. So keep the mom, there's always a mom who shows up, or dad or something like that, keep them back while we're cutting those cars up. And then don't be afraid to cut stuff up. Having said that, don't cut shit up just because we can't. There is liability involved in that. But if you need to pop a door off to get a patient out easily, or take the roof to make your job easier and safer for the patient, by all means do it. But just don't start cutting stuff just because you can. That's it. Oh, there's more about that later. All right, any questions on motor vehicle crashes or crashes? All right, my favorite winter and year-round emergencies, utility line incidents. Woohoo! We used to have another lieutenant who would take the crew out on a utility line down. And it would be a cable TV line, and they'd be out on scene for 3 hours. We don't want to do that. These are rarely an emergency, so chill the F out. We're going to get to another slide. It's going to go over how to determine what line is down. But right from the start, if a pole's on fire, it's still not an emergency. I'll see people freak out. Oh my God, there's a pole fire. Yeah, and what are you going to do? It's being burned by hundreds of thousands of volts of electricity. We're not going to do anything. We're just going to sit back and watch it burn and then keep people back. So just relax. There's not much that we can do other than traffic control and crowd control, so just do that kind of stuff. Get a poll number when possible. Hopefully you all know where to get that poll number. And then keep in mind the providers in our area for the different utilities. So electric, we have 3 different providers. The Village of Yellow Springs within the village limits, and some on East Enum Road between the village limits and Hyde. Dayton Power and Light primarily throughout our area, and then Ohio Edison First Energy. Cable, primarily Spectrum, but if it's fiber optic lines, it's Cincinnati Bell. I don't know why, but it is. And then AT&T is our phone provider. So how are things spaced on utility poles? This is how it works. From the top down, this is where we have the electric on the top. Electric lines are very thin. If you look up at the pole, where they connect to the pole, they're going to go through a ceramic insulator. So it doesn't just hang on the pole. It's got a little ceramic thing that keeps it from setting the pole on fire on a regular basis. The vast majority of electric lines for transmission do not have any insulation on them. This is why they come down, set fires, spark things, go from there. So the top of your pole is going to be your power lines. Typically, everything above, if there's a transformer on the pole, everything above the transformer is electric. As you move down the line, you're going to have cable television and telephone. Cable TV lines tend to be thicker than electric lines, and they tend to be a lighter color. They'll also, if you look at how the line is hanging, it may have loops in it, and it may have, looks like a fanny pack attached to it. Telephone lines are much thicker. So if you see a thick line down on the ground, that is a telephone line. It is rare that you will see a broken telephone line down on the ground. They're thick and strong and may even support a pole when a pole breaks off. Power lines are the prima donnas. They will snap and break at a moment's notice. Doesn't take a whole lot. But the cable and telephone tend to be a lot stronger and will hold things together. So from the top down, power is at the top because it's the most dangerous, and the low-hanging fruit are your telephone and cable television. So just to make it kind of clear who covers what, the vast majority of our area, as I said, is DP&L, Dayton Power and Light. They're responding from Xenia typically, depending on the time of day. The north side of Clifton, and then portions of Tanyard Road and Hilt Road are Ohio Edison. And Ohio Edison responds from Springfield. They're part of First Energy Corporation. And then the Village of Yellow Springs, again, covers that. And the guys from Public Works handle that. Interesting story, back when Hurricane Ike came through, Village of Yellow Springs, Miami Township, no power. There were parts of the township that had no power for 8 days. So we're about 3 or 4 days into the incident, and we're on the emergency management side of what we do. So we're going door to door out in the township to see how people are doing and if they need bottled water, because we had tons of bottled water from EMA. And a member and I are out on Hilt Road. So we hit the first house on Hilt, which is the old bed and breakfast that Lamar Spracklin used to own. No power. Great, here's some water. Next house over, no power. Here's some bottled water. Next house over, same thing. Come to the fourth house, It's a newer home. As we're walking up to knock on the door, we hear music coming out. All the lights are on, and I look in the window, and there's a guy on a treadmill. That was the first house on Ohio Edison. And Ohio Edison was fed from this side, and they had restored power. He had power 3 hours after the storm came through. So you may encounter those situations with different providers, different areas, that kind of stuff. So coverage area, DP&L, VYS, and Ohio Edison. So basic electrical safety, always assume down power lines are live. Hopefully, I mean, I don't have to, you're not hearing this the first time. Anytime it's a power line down, or if it's a line you don't know, assume it's power and it's live. The movies and TV will have down power lines dancing across the ground and making cool sounds. From what the power people tell me, that all depends on how much power is going through it. So sometimes just a basic transmission line may not have enough power to make it do all that crazy stuff. But you can get into some serious trunk lines and that type of stuff, which you'll hear, sounds like explosions. It'll look like lightning on the ground. It'll melt the dirt into glass. So it's going to be a whole variety of different things. Keep at least 30 feet away from any down power line, at least. This includes if the lines are down on a car or the car is right close to that power line, they need to wait until utilities get there to shut that power down. If you drop dead from being electrocuted, you're not helping anyone, except whoever your next of kin is, because they're going to get a ton of money. If the line is near water, keep away. Even a small puddle will cause that electric to continue through the ground. So stay clear. Call the utility company sooner than later upon arrival on scene. So make sure you know which utility company it is. If there are lines down and a vehicle is trapped or people are trapped, which we have had those incidents, I think we had 2 of them last year or earlier this year. Dispatch, let them know that so that they will let the utility company know so that we get them to respond faster. They don't have lights and sirens, but they do have a priority system to get out, especially if there's been a big storm that's come through. Otherwise, you're going to be waiting for a while. And then, yeah, call utility company. What's going on with this damn thing? All right, any questions on the world of electrical? All right, so some general safety stuff. So response safety in the winter. We have some fantastic operators here for our apparatus, and we have some meh ones. Winter is not the time to determine if you're meh or good, so you should really be a good driver. So if you typically drive warp 7 to an incident, winter is not the time for warp 7. Back it down to impulse power, to use a Star Trek analogy there. So before we even start, is the apparatus ready for the winter? Do we have salt or sand carried on the apparatus to help us out? We've done this a lot in the medics to help out. Maybe a shovel to help dig things out or dig us out, hopefully not. Something I read about today, actually, which is really interesting, and I want to do this, is antifreeze in a spray bottle on the engine. So you can spray it on your fittings and on your couplings so that they don't freeze up, which like made my head explode. What a wonderful idea. Are you ready? Is the MPO ready? Are they familiar with the operation of the defrosters? Make sure, now that Engine 81 is out of service, that had the world's most psychotic defrosting system. Make sure that you know how to use your defroster, how to use the climate control system, how to use the heat to keep people and your patients warm depending on the truck. Understand about your auxiliary braking devices. Engine 81, when it was in service, it had a transmission retarder that needed to be turned off on slick surfaces. Engine 82 has a jake brake, which is a lot better in terms of stopping. It's using engine exhaust to stop the engine, slow the truck down. So it's not as finicky as the transmission retarder. But keep in mind, for every apparatus you are taking out, from the Chief Mobile to the brush truck to the tankers, cold weather, snow and ice, there's going to be reduced speeds, major need for reduced speeds, and increased stopping distances. Coupled with that, decreased visibility. It's going to be really hard to see. You may have to turn your ER lights off if you're responding in a heavy snowstorm, because our lights will reflect back on the snow, and it makes it really difficult to see anything, particularly once you're out in the township. So keep that in mind. If there's a blizzard going on and we're going to a call, your lights and sirens probably don't make much of a difference anyway. Think about your response routes during inclement weather. If there's a heavy storm going on, it might be fastest to take the residential streets to where you're going, but you may want to stay on the primaries. The Village of Yellow Springs tends to do a pretty decent job with snow removal on the streets, but it's easy to get overwhelmed. And if it's a holiday, it's going to be tough because they got to call guys in. So 68 will be plowed by ODOT. They're pretty good about that. So plan your route accordingly if you're the operator. Think about public works. Do we need them to help us out? So if we need salt on the scene, if everyone's slipping and falling on the scene, maybe we can get, if we're in the village, the public works guys have always been good and will come out and help us out and spread some salt. If we're in the township, Dan is great. He's always out and he'll come out and salt for us. He likes to do that kind of stuff. Excuse me. And also think about our increased response times. It's going to take you a lot longer to get to Clifton. It's going to take you a lot longer to get to Antioch University than it would normally if there's heavy snow or ice or an ice storm or something like that. So think about, if you're the officer, how is this going to influence your actions of the first two company? Are you going to be later than normal? If it's a fire, is the fire going to progress farther than it would have? So think about these things. If it's a crash, how long has the patient now been trapped or just stuck in their car during a really cold snap or a blizzard, that kind of stuff? And then think about the other drivers. 9 times out of 10 during regular time, the other drivers that we encounter are not the best. I was driving, what the hell was I driving yesterday? I was driving something. Oh, my own chiefmobile going to a call. And I had 3 people at intersections who just paid no attention and zoomed right through. It's going to be even worse during a snowstorm or an ice storm where everyone is terrified and they're driving crappy. But they had to get out that night just to go down to Tom's and get that last container of hummus. So make sure that you are extra vigilant, that your officer, if there's one up in the front seat with you, they're helping you clear intersections and all that kind of stuff. The other drivers may try and stop also. But if they suddenly see you and slam on the brakes like they do normally, on the snow and ice, they're going to slide right in front of you. So be very careful. Fireground concerns. So getting into structural fire incidents, are our tactical positions that we'd want attainable? Or are they blocked by snow? Can we do the cool, hit it hard from the yard, darken it down from the outside, or is there a 6-foot snowdrift on that side of the house? If there is, then go back to traditional firefighting. Don't try and send poor TJ through a snowdrift with an 1 3/4 charged line just to hit it hard from the outside. Due to setbacks and snow piles and that kind of stuff, do we need to bring additional lengths of hose with us just in case to extend that crosslay? Think about that too. If we do and we add 4 sections to the crosslay, is it going to be effective in any way, shape, or form? Maybe we need to go to a 2.5. So these are things that if you're the officer, you need to really consider and think about. And can we get personnel to all sides of the building? Again, Jesus, Siri. And then think about, the officer wants to do a 360. If there's deep snow, don't get trapped in the back of the house in snow. Just assume. Try and do what you can. Think also about obstructions in a yard. Obstacles in a yard that could be obstructed by a lot of snow or ice or drifts. There could be a swimming pool. There could be steps that you don't see that go down. So just be really careful in these situations. And we do have to sometimes alter the way that we function to make up for the weather and to be safe, because safety is job one. What the hell? What the hell? All right. Are hydrants visible and accessible? Can we find the hydrant? Are they buried? People in town have been pretty good over the years about digging out their hydrant. There is a guy on Allen Street. He lives at the corner of Allen, or the intersection of Allen and Spillane. And he's a retired Air Force officer, so he will dig that hydrant out, and it's a 3x3 perfect square all the way around the thing. It's fantastic. But if you haven't been here, since we haven't had a winter storm warning in 2 years, we will send crews out during the daytime or in the evening to go out and find hydrants and start shoveling them out ahead of time to make our job easier. And at least that way, you're staying busy, and then you'll be hungry and come back, and the auxiliary will have made a giant meal of chili and hot dogs, except we don't have one anymore, and that doesn't happen. So anyway, can you find them? Once you find them, are they usable or are they frozen? It does happen. The hydrants do freeze. Hydrants do leak, and then they'll freeze in the winter, which causes us some problems. Fire pump issues. Remember, no matter what anyone tells you, every fire pump, every tank, every valve in a truck leaks a little bit. So you're probably always going to have a little bit of water in your pump that will freeze and cause damage. So it's better to keep your pump full with 25 to 30 gallons of water and then get on scene and circulate it to avoid freezing. Be sure to keep water flowing through your lines and appliances. This is something that people don't realize sometimes. You have got to keep the water moving through your water moving through those lines at a little bit, otherwise they're going to completely freeze. So it is very important. If there's a hose line down, leave the nozzle cracked a little bit so some water can come out and keep that water flowing. You haven't lived until you fought a fire when it's 22 below zero, and then you have to pack the hose up and it's completely frozen solid. So you're basically just folding it and tossing it on the hose bed to get it back. So keep everything partially open until ready to shut down and pack up. And then once we stop the water flow, pick up those hose lines as quickly as possible so they don't completely freeze to the ground, because it'll happen. And then I've heard people say things like, well, it's okay, it's just a fire hose. Frankly, the fire hose is worth more than some of you guys. So sorry, it's just the way it is. So we got to get that hose back and in one piece. I'm talking to you, Murphy. So here's some hydrant excitement in the winter. If you see this or this, these two frozen guys, don't try to use that hydrant. FDNY has hydrant thawing units. We don't. So find the next one and hope that it's not frozen as well. Also keep in mind, in the winter months, water main breaks are much more common. So we may have those issues going as well. Public Works will jump on those as quickly as possible, but there's really only so much they can do. So just be careful. Keep your eye open on those things. And we'll all get out alive. Member safety. Of course, we want to take care of ourselves. So think about slips and falls. I've seen some people do some amazing slips and falls on a fire scene when it's icy outside. Chris Kitts comes to mind. I've seen people fall out of the apparatus because they stepped on something slippery. So you can fall on scene. That's very common. And then falls at the station where the water, hopefully not here as much, but you know, ice gets on the ramp or in the bay, that kind of stuff. It is entirely possible, you know, things will get so icy. I've been on medic calls before where it was so icy, we couldn't get the guy, we couldn't barely get to the person's house. So you may need additional crews with axes to actually chop up the ice so you can get out of there. And again, that weather may be coming this way, an Arctic vortex. So we got to be careful and get ready for that stuff. Think also about our guys and gals, firefighter rehab issues. We're going to have shorter work cycles if it's really cold and move them through rehab more often to keep them warm and keep them hydrated. People don't always think about that. You know, what do we need to hydrate? It's 20 below zero. No, you're still working hard and you're going to need to hydrate. Rehab, where it might be outside in the summer, you need to move it inside. So it's got to be inside a medic or something like that where the guys can warm up a little bit, thaw a little bit, and go from there. Frostbite can happen very quickly, and we need to make sure that we don't freeze our crews to death. We may also need additional personnel. So if you are short-staffed or you think you're gonna need a lot of people, just call for mutual aid. We're all in the same ball, so make sure you do that. And then structural and equipment concerns. Snow and ice on the structure. We're spraying water onto a structure. We like to think that all that water is just gonna, run off because it's not gonna turn to ice because there's a fire. But a lot of it will, in fact, turn to ice, which then puts additional weight and stress on the building and can hasten a collapse. So we need to think about that. These buildings are not designed for that. Extreme heavy snow loads will also cause issues. Buildings in this part of the country are not designed for a heavy additional snow dead load. If you're in Vermont or Minnesota, yes. But here, typically buildings are designed to sustain maybe 6 inches of snow. So if we get into a 2.5, 3 foot situation and there's a fire, there's a very high potential for collapse. So we need to be careful with that. Also, if we have our ladders up, locks and halyards are going to freeze up, which is a real bitch and a half. If there's an aerial ladder, aerials get into this whole big thing, especially the smaller ones with a lighter tip load. They get covered in ice, that increases the weight, and it can also increase the fail factor on the ladder. So be careful. Your SCBA, back in the old days when I started, we had MSA, SCBA, and I think Virginia Township uses MSA now. At that time, MSA used the bell to activate, that activated when your air was low. I think they still do. Which was great until it got covered in water and then it froze, and then you could not, the bell didn't work, and then you were going to die. On ours, with the whistles, as long as it doesn't get covered in ice, you'll still hear it. On a Scott pack, the whole thing's going to vibrate, so you'll probably be fine. They also had speaker mics on your portables. If they get completely covered in ice, you're not going to hear anything, and it probably won't work that well. Motorola works pretty well with everything, but maybe not that. So a lot of weird things we never really think about. Some of the tools may not work if it's extreme cold, or it may not work very well. Your mobile phones aren't going to work. Battery life on a portable radio is going to decrease in the extreme cold. So there's a lot of different factors to consider on these really cold nights and snowy incidents. If you haven't been covered in ice, hopefully you will be, just so you learn. It's important. The picture with that nozzle flowing, they're just flowing the water, so it's got somewhere to go. Look at that pump. I mean, that's a nightmare. I can't even imagine that much situation there on snow and stuff. So, and then Fred's there shoveling out his hydrant. Any questions on this winter firefighting emergency stuff? All right, so for CE purposes, I've got Meister, Alex, Georgia, TJ, Jeremy, Cap Myers, Nicole, Peter, Ryan, Wasserschmidt, and Murphy. Anyone else that I missed? Make sure, because I want to make sure you all get your stuff. Oh, interesting. And a note from Ted, speaker mics have drain holes on the bottom. They will not drain if they're inverted. So keep that in mind. Thank you, Ted. So you'll get a certificate. You'll get 2 hours of CEs for attending tonight. And if any of your friends want to watch it who weren't able to, in theory, that's recorded, and I'll be able to find where that recording went, and we'll get it up on YouTube. And I say in theory because I'm kind of an idiot when that happens. So we'll see. Anyway, thank you guys very much. Next one's in 2 weeks, and I don't know where that is. I think it's Size Up or some of that. And we'll go from there, and hopefully we'll start doing some EMS ones as well. So thank you guys for joining. Have a good night. I'm back.